start playing on iRacing, like, oh man, I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna win the Coke Championship, it's gonna be so easy. And then you get to rookies, and you're like, oh man, I'm really not that good. Hard work from there is what propelled me into the Coke Series and to have the success I did. And I got protested for driving a damaged car back to pit road, which I knew was in the sporting code, but I felt like I did not drive a dangerous car back to pit road. It was hard to drive.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Pit Crew podcast for episode number 6, man. We're 6 episodes into this thing. I am joined by Robert Hill, and we got a special guest on for tonight. It's going to be NASCAR Series driver, Coca-Cola Series driver, Tucker Minter. We're going to bring him on very soon. But how are you feeling about this, Robert Hill, man?
I don't know if you guys have noticed, those at home that are watching, but somebody's missing here tonight, DLB.
Yeah, okay, so Chris's microphone was a no-go. So, they trusted me and Robert Hill to run the show here. So it's going to be a DLB x Robert Hill show here tonight. Let's go ahead and bring on Tucker Minter here. I feel like that would be the way to go. I think we got to bring him on. Tucker, welcome. You won the Drive Smart to Daytona Challenge. You're here, buddy. How does it feel after winning the Drive Smart to Daytona Challenge? And tell us about your experience going to Daytona.
Yeah, I mean, thanks to Drive Smart so much for putting on the Drive Smart to Daytona series. I didn't think I was going to be able to make it to Daytona this year, and now I got this hat over my shoulder that everybody can see that proves I went to Daytona. Got to see my new boss, William Byron, bring home the Daytona 500. It was a really awesome weekend.
So you talk about your new boss, William Byron. That brings me to my first question of the night. So you're driving for William Byron's esports team. How big of a role has William played into your 2024 season? And how much advice does a guy like William Byron give you, given his history of sim racing and that ultimately getting him up to the Cup Series?
Yeah, I mean, being on William Byron Esports, William he's not super hands-on, but he is a part of the team. He's always kind of checking in, wishing us luck, asking us about how the races went, what we think we could do better, things to improve, things like that. And he's got a great team of people around him that are really kind of pushing William Byron Esports to the next level. They've got some people on the back end with his team at Pro Sport Management that do an awesome job. And then Logitech on board, obviously, they do so much for us that I feel like I'm in a really good spot in William Byron Esports. We haven't started the season off too great, but I feel like that's been more luck based than preparation based. So I'm looking forward to the season rolling on and getting to some more tracks that I think I'll do better at.
Yeah, Tucker, obviously, right now in the Coca-Cola iRacing series, runner-up last year after a 3-victory, very strong season, but it doesn't just start there in the Coke series. Where did you get your start in the sim racing world? And was it like many of us on NASCAR 2003? Maybe you were a console racer. Where did we first see Tucker Minter?
I never figured out how I could download NASCAR 2003 when I was younger.
Oh, man.
I wanted to, but I wasn't really good enough with computers. I guess, I mean, it's not that it's that complicated looking back on it, but I never could figure out how to download it. So I started out, my first NASCAR game was NASCAR 2009 on the Xbox 360, and then obviously the Utechnics games, Inside Line 2011, all the way through NASCAR 15. I was playing on the Xbox 360. So I always had a love for racing games that was kind of, you know, everybody else was playing like all sorts of different stuff. I was just all racing all the time. I liked Forza a little bit, not as much as I like my NASCAR games, some F1 games, everything like that. But once I was old enough to get an iRacing subscription, that was the place I was at. And I mean, I still play, some other racing games every once in a while just for fun. I'll, load up some other titles, but nothing compares to iRacing for me.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, we've all worked our way up from the consoles and NASCAR 2003 for me. Obviously, you started in NASCAR 2009. But when you got to iRacing, what was your first car that you really just fell in love with, and maybe a track to go along with that you were just hooked on?
Yeah, I mean, everybody starts out with street stock, obviously, but
Yeah.
for me, I really liked USA. A lot of people, when they're in rookies, they gravitate. Back in my day, USA and Charlotte were the only two free tracks on the rookie schedule. Now there's a few more short tracks that they rotate to, but at Charlotte, USA, people would gravitate to USA because it's kind of like Daytona or Talladega for street stock. I started disliking that pretty early on, even though it was easy for it was really easy to be up to speed, obviously, because you're holding it wide open. I liked the skill gap that USA provided, even though I wasn't very good, and it took me longer than I care to admit to get out of rookies. And when I got out of rookies, my I rating was like 3 or 400, which is kind of crazy. Now looking back, been in the top 25 in oval I ratings now for quite a while, bouncing around that page. So to know that I came from like 3 or 400 racing the rookie street stock, it's fun to look back on.
It absolutely is. And I don't know about you, Dustin, but I think when I started on iRacing, the rookie car was the Legends. And there's some videos floating around on Facebook still of me putting my Legend car on top of somebody else's and doing half a lap around Lanier. So good times there. I don't know about you, my friend.
So yeah, obviously when I started iRacing, it was 2017. When I started, I got lucky and won my first race, but hey, some would say it probably been downhill from there. But anyway, my iRacing career kind of was up and down, and it was truly a great experience working my way through the ranks, eventually getting your A-class license and getting a race with some of these sim racing legends like a William Byron. I'm curious for Tucker Minter, what year did you start iRacing? And was there a turning point of where you maybe felt like, hey, I can make a career out of this and I can go head to head with the best? Because you just told me that you had a 400 I rating on your rookie season. What was the turning point?
Yeah, I started in 2014, right around my birthday in May. Um, and like I said, I was way down in the dumps, and it took years really to, climb out of that. I always felt like I was good at iRacing. I think everybody thinks that when they start playing on iRacing, like, oh man, I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna win the Coke Championship. It's gonna be so easy. And then you get to rookies, and you're like, oh man, I'm really not that good. And so, around about 2016, 2017. I kind of felt like I was never going to be at that level that the Coke Series guys were at, or the Peak Series at the time. And it took until about 2020. I got up to about 5,000, 5,500 I rating, and I was invited to join a team called Nexus on the oval side. And they put some guys into the Coke Series before, and I think it was really just the confidence that I was being invited to a major oval team. Um, that and then hard work from there is what propelled me into the Coke series and to have the success I did. But it really was the confidence of being invited onto that team and being in that environment that was like, okay, well, maybe I am good enough to compete at a high level.
And that's awesome. So also we had a conversation at Daytona that was similar to this. What kind of advice would you give someone who maybe has been on iRacing for 3, 4 years and they feel like they're maxed out? What do they do to take that next step, that extra step to find more speed, get more calculated, figure out little things, whether if it's saving tires, is what do they need to do to maybe go from a anywhere from a 1,500 I rating to a 2,500 I rating and actually make that jump and start growing as a sim racer to one day get to the level that you're at?
Yeah, I mean the benefit now in 2024, 10 years on from when I started iRacing, is that there's so many more resources to go to if you want to get better. Back in the day, you would watch maybe an empty box video or Rutgers Kev. I remember was big. He streamed NIS. Um, Now you have guys like Casey Kerwin that stream all the time on Twitch, and you can see his inputs, which helps a little bit. But if you really want to get in depth, there's setup shops. I work with Altus Engineering, which is with my backend team, and they're on the VRS platform where you can compare my data to your data. It's a super easy to use platform. It's got a lot of tools where you can look at where I'm getting on the gas, where you're getting on the gas. Maybe you're getting on the gas earlier, but that's causing you to wear your tires out. Maybe you drive into the corner too deep, things like that. Or even seeing where your line is. Maybe you're 3 feet further to the right than I am, and that's just messing up your whole corner. So there's a lot of cool tools out there that you can use to improve on your own. And then, of course, now coaching is a lot bigger of a deal. So there's a lot of guys out there that do coaching. Like I said, I do coaching with Altus Engineering on the VRS platform, and so that's that one-on-one really personal connection. And then maybe if you learn something from a coach, you're able to implement that to more places. So, you pay for an hour, but then it helps you for many hours down the road because they have taught you kind of these fundamental things.
Absolutely. So obviously with sim rigs and everything goes, so like you see my sim rig here. It's not like the most expensive one, but how important is it to invest into a very expensive sim rig versus, some people will have a $10,000 sim rig and you have some people playing on a $200-300 wheel hooked up to their desk. So, I mean, how important is that to kind of, because a lot of people ask, what do they need to actually get into sim racing and how much of a budget do they really need to get into it and how important is it to get the proper equipment?
Yeah, the great thing about sim racing is that your equipment is not ever really a limiting factor. If you pay more money, for the really, really high end stuff, it's a little bit nicer. There's some more creature comforts, but there are a lot of guys you see in the Coke series that race with some, I mean, not cheap wheels. Cheap kind of indicates that the quality is bad, but they're just relatively inexpensive, and they're competing at an extremely high level. My teammate Nick Ottinger at William Byron Esports, he raced with Logitech, their family of product wheels since he joined the Coke series in I think 2013 or 2014, and he still uses Logitech products today. He just upgraded to their new direct drive wheel system, which is a bit more on the expensive side, but he used their starting out wheels, is what I would call them. Like I used, I had a G27 back in the day, was only $350. Had a nice wheel and pedals, and that's really a great entry point to the market. Logitech has the G29 and 920 now. That series, it's a few $100, but as long as you have the computer to go along with it, and you can get some good discounts on an iRacing subscription, where you can get 3 months free at a lot of places, if you find the right codes, or you get some free content along the way. That iRacing, there's a high barrier to entry. It seems like, which can be a good thing. You see in like the console spaces where if you want to do an online race, you feel like you're getting wrecked all the time by people that don't care, drive backwards, things like that. Luckily, the barrier to entry on iRacing kind of makes it a little harder for those types of people to get through. Um, and it's really not that high of a barrier to entry if you feel like treating it like a hobby.
Well, I'm actually going to dip away from sim racing just for a second here, Tucker. Obviously, this weekend is a big weekend for sim to reality. We're seeing Vincente Salas go and race in the Truck Series at Coda with Tyler Young's team. We see Presley Sora, another prominent iRacer, taking part in the Arca East Series with Andy Hillenberg's team. Have you done any real world racing? And if not, or if so, do you have any aspirations of doing so down the road potentially?
I've not. The only real life racing I've done is in some rental carts around home, and also a GoPro Motorplex over in Mooresville. But I'd love to do something in a real car. Someday maybe race a late model. But just I don't really come from a racing family, and so it's hard for people like me. I feel like to get into a real life race car, and that's what I you said to get away from sim racing. But that's what I really love about sim racing is that it's so easy for people that have an interest in racing to get started. And I'm really great at tying this back around to William Byron, I guess. But he started on a computer. Well, he started on a computer. His family said, "Okay, well, you're pretty good at this. Let's find the next steps." And so, um, not everybody is able to find the next steps, but it's able to kind of fill that need that you want. And so, like I said, I'd love to drive a real car. If somebody gives me a call, says, "Hey, come drive this car," I'd be down to do it. But um, sim racing kind of scratches that itch for me.
For sure. And you mentioned before how you got your start playing the NASCAR '09 video games. What got you into that? Was it somebody in your family that was watching NASCAR? Did you just like the look of the cars on the case of the game? What was it that got you into the sport?
Yeah, so I always loved cars since I was a kid, and I was never really big into, you know, kind of your stick and ball sports, football, soccer, baseball, nothing like that ever really interested me. Um, and then, but I liked cars, and I never really was exposed to race cars. Like I said, no one in my family or in my immediate family is big into NASCAR, F1, IndyCar, anything like that. But I was at church one Sunday, and my cousin was talking about. Um, the NASCAR race. I think he might have been watching some races with his dad, and he was talking about Dale Jr. And so it just so happened there was nothing I could find on TV that I wanted to watch on Disney Channel or Nickelodeon, anything like that back when I was 7. And so ESPN was showing the Phoenix race, and the fall Phoenix race in 2008. And so I tuned into that, and I was like, well, I know one name in this race, Dale Earnhardt Jr. So I was looking for where he was running and trying to figure that out. And something really just clicked in me. It was like, okay, I like cars. This is the competition. I always liked competing, but like I said, I was never, super athletic or into sports like that. And this was kind of like, okay, something inside me clicked. And so um, I kind of got obsessed over the off season. I got a bunch of those racing magazines where they tell you the stats of every driver and who to look for going into 2009 and things like that. And I've been entrenched in NASCAR ever since.
So I take it from what you were saying, you became a Dale Jr. fan pretty much right out of the gates. Did you stick with him until he retired, or did you maybe find another driver that just fit your style a little bit more that you were hooked on?
Oh yeah, diehard loyal Dale Earnhardt Jr. fan all the way. And like I said, I started watching end of 2008, and if you know Dale Jr. history, that was a really rough time to be a Dale Jr. fan. So,
Absolutely.
um, went 3 years watching without seeing him win a Cup race. So I feel like I was pretty loyal. My cousin, who said he liked Dale Jr. at the time, he told me he became a Jimmy Johnson fan. He claims to this day he didn't jump on the bandwagon. I don't believe that, but he claims he didn't jump on the bandwagon of the 7-time champion.
He jumped on the
We'll see about
bandwagon.
that. Yeah.
And then when Junior retired, who'd you go to? Who was your favorite driver? Who is your favorite driver right now? Obviously, you might be contractually obligated to say William Byron. If that's the case, that's fine. But who's the driver that you stick with now?
Yeah, so I mean, when Dale Jr. retired, it kind of took a lot of soul searching because when Dale ran bad, it ruined the whole week, right? When if he
For
got
sure.
wrecked, it was like, man, this sucked, and you had to wait a whole week. Um, and there was no driver that really made me really feel that way for a few years. I kind of like Chase Elliott, I kind of like Kyle Larson, but it wasn't like, oh man, it really ruined my week that they got wrecked. It was just like, oh well, whatever. But when Larson moved back to Hendrick Motorsports, I really kind of like that combination. Dale Jr.'s old team, everything like that. And I really got into Larson with how much grassroots racing he does. I watch a lot of that on Flow Racing, Dirt Vision, and go to a lot of local tracks. So that kind of gave me a reason to like Larson. And then when he did the video game move at Darlington, I was in the grandstands at Darlington. I was like, man, that was so sick, and that kind of really hooked me on Larson. You can see some of the die casts I got of him behind me, but so I like Larson. I like Byron as well. Obviously, a teammate, my team owner, great guy. Daytona 500 champion. So definitely pulling for him and Larson, and the Hendrick guys overall. But when Dale Jr. races his late model stock, I'm there. I've only missed one race that Dale's run since he retired, which was his Homestead race in the Xfinity car last year. I've been to all of his late model races, and I'm still holding out hope I'll see him win in person. Knock on wood. Cross my fingers. One day.
You gonna go to Bristol later in the year? Then they announced today that he's gonna be doing that one with Hellman's.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the night race at Bristol anyway. And so it's just a cherry on top that Dale was there. My heart was pulled out of my chest when he caught on fire after running so well this year. That really broke my heart. That was just a heartbreaker. But yeah, I'm looking forward. Hopefully, he has the same speed when he goes back this year.
It's definitely hope so. Dustin, you looked pretty excited about that Dale Jr. announcement up there.
I'm gonna be at Bristol, so it's gonna be fun. I think anytime Dale Jr. goes to Bristol, that's obviously going to put on a big show. And the action we've seen this past week at Bristol, I think it's gonna be a fun weekend all around. Anytime you're night racing at Bristol, it's going to be a lot of fun. But I got a question for both Tucker and Robert here. So
Ooh.
iRacing has, a very fun protest system. I'll be the first to say I have been protested, maybe, I don't know, one time suspended for retaliation. I'm wondering if any of y'all have ever been hit with the protest hammer.
I was really proud of this for a time. I had never been protested from the time I joined iRacing until last year around June. I was running a Formula 4 race, just a random race with one of my friends, Ryan Doucette. That's another Coke Series driver, and it was at Monza, and everybody knows the chicane at Monza. The first turn there, everybody funnels into it. Half the field doesn't make it out. Well, I was so close to making it out, but I got clipped in one of my rear tires, and so my toe was all knocked out. And I'm like, well, this series has a fast repair. Let me limp it back to pit road. And so I drove off the racing line, safely. I didn't, I didn't spin into anybody or anything like that. And I got protested for driving a damaged car back to pit road, which I knew was in the sporting code, but I felt like I did not drive a dangerous car back to pit road. It was hard to drive, but I'm like, trust me, I'm a professional. I can drive this car back to pit road. I didn't cause a wreck, in my opinion, driving back to the track, and so I got a warning for that. That's my only ever protest in iRacing.
What about you, Robert?
Yeah, yeah, I've definitely been protested. I'm looking at one back in the day from 2010. I got an email from Nimcross, and my response to him, I was like 14 at the time. I said, "Who in the world sent you this request?" I want to contact them and give them a piece of my mind. I got suspended after that. It didn't go over well, so don't respond to Nimcross getting all mad. It usually doesn't go well, but I did get protested a couple months ago for jumping a start. Just wasn't thinking right. I just thought maybe I'll try to sneak out a couple extra positions, and I guess passing for 30th upset some people.
My only protest I've ever gotten was only one time. It was my rookie season, 2017. I'm new at iRacing. I'm learning. I'm running the ARCA car, and I get like walled by somebody. We pit, and then I get walled by him again. Then I get spun. And I decided to go for like full 2012 Jeff Gordon Phoenix on this guy. 18-year-old Dustin wasn't too smart. I think I ended up taking out a few of the leaders as well in the process, and they gave me a week suspension. Very well deserved, I will tell them that, but that's my experience, my one and only protest on iRacing. So it's always fun to hear, what everyone else has got caught with. So out of all the stories, I guess I'm the only one with retaliation that got me suspended. But yeah, I'll be always fun there on iRacing. But the iRacing community is so much fun. It's so tight, and the fact that you could go league racing or try to work your way up to the top division every step of the way is anything from esports to a hobby. And a lot of people were very scared to jump into it because the amount of money you got to invest into it. But overall, I would say it's pretty much worth it. I mean, Robert, you said you've been on this since 2010, and
Yeah.
Tucker has been on it since 2013, 2014. What do you think is the biggest thing you learned on iRacing as far as Tucker? Because I feel like sim racing has taught me a lot of lessons. Sometimes you got to let things go. Sometimes you got to, step it up at the right time. I felt like, but what's the biggest lesson you felt like you learned throughout your years of sim racing, whether if that's in eNASCAR or just in the rookie division?
I'd say the biggest thing, especially from working racing at the top level, is just the importance of a team. Even in something, sim racing seems such an individual sport. You don't have that team, that pit crew working with you, or things like that. But the success of the top level really comes down to who works the best with their team and is able to, the 2 weeks leading up to each race, who's able to find the most speed. And how you get to that level is having the right people that get along well, have good banter with each other and everything. And I've been fortunate, my team on the back end, Altus, and we've been working with Coanda as well for the last year. So we really get along great. And I think that's been like the most important thing is making sure that the team is gelling really well. And that's kind of been the takeaway I've had.
Absolutely. I mean, a good team is always how you gotta build and get stronger and get faster. And you said the start of your 2024 season probably wasn't the greatest. Can you take us through that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean it's been tough on the number 97 Logitech G machine. We started out at Daytona, and we're so close at the top level, especially at a plate track, that it comes down to a lot of it in plate qualifying is the wind direction blowing. And the wind direction did not blow in my favor, so I started dead last at Daytona of the cars that put down a qualifying time. And then from there, we kind of played a little bit of strategy through the first half of the race so that when we pit, we were able to jump ahead. And that worked out really well. But eventually, we kind of got shuffled to the middle lane, and then we were looking pretty good. I thought we were still in a good spot to push back to the lead. Still had about 30 laps to go in the race, and we got caught up in an incident that I thought was very clearly one person's fault. They didn't get any incident points for it, but that really ruined my race and a few others. And I was never able to really recover from that, even though I didn't have too much damage. I had enough that the track position was just such a big hit, and things didn't play out that I finished 27th. Well, then we rolled into Las Vegas 2 weeks later. Las Vegas, I felt like was a track that I really struggled with last year. For my standards, I finished fifth, which was a good result, but I didn't feel like I felt like I was the limiting factor. My teammate Jordy, we were both on Team Dylan at the time. He finished second and had a really good shot at winning the race. Versus I was a little bit further back in fifth and feel like I didn't maximize the car. So I worked really hard through the week to get better at Las Vegas, and then my race ended on lap three with somebody driving a little bit over their heads. I felt like and overcorrecting and wiping out, ironically, Jordy and I both in the same wreck. So then we finished 30, I don't know, eighth, ninth, or whatever, somewhere around last. And so we roll into Atlanta, qualify sixth. The wind gods were in my favor. We had a fixed setup race, which is one of the three fixed setup races we do in the NASCAR Coca Cola iRacing series this season. And my lane just didn't really take off at the start, which ended up shuffling me back to around 20th. And I went down to the bottom line just to kind of ride, take care of the car, kind of back my way out of the pack slowly, make sure I wasn't in any incidents. And it just so happened that somebody decided to go three wide right next to me for about 20th. Ran somebody over, pushing them too hard on the corner exit, and they wrecked right across my nose. So um, that hurt my race for the rest of the pretty much the rest of the race until we got to a green white checkered. And luckily, in the green white checkered scenarios, I was able to avoid a lot of the chaos and bring it home 19th. But we were definitely looking for a lot more to start the season. But I'm looking forward to Richmond, my home track. Hopefully, we'll get it back on the right track here.
Absolutely. So obviously, there's tracks that stand out. For me, a lot of my commenters always told me like, "Oh, Atlanta is a track that is a strong point for me," or Martinsville is a strong point. What track do you feel like is your strong point on iRacing, where you just feel like hands down, it's your best track, your favorite track that's going to give you the best shot to win every time you go there?
I would say, I mean, right now it would be Phoenix. I feel like I have a lot of speed at Phoenix, but that's a long ways down the road for us in the season. I also feel really good at Richmond. Like I said, it's my home track. Um, Turned a lot of laps there, and it really fits my driving style. It's pretty similar to Phoenix with the way you enter the corners and kind of have to be really technical and precise with your driving. So Richmond and Phoenix are definitely my favorites. And then Charlotte, ironically, has become a strong suit for me in the last year or so. I always felt like I was hopelessly lost there. And then we started testing for the Coke Series last year, and I was pretty fast. And then I ended up winning the race. So I'd say Charlotte's also on my list.
So, in order to be a top eNASCAR driver, you obviously got to be very calculated, whether if it's tire wear or, how hard to push it here, how hard to push it there, and just it's a very calculated sport. At what point of your sim racing career did you have to become this calculated?
I would say 2021 was the time that I really kind of did a lot of developing as a driver. I worked really hard, taught myself a lot about setup building, and when you're building a setup, you have to be really in tune and feeling what the car or truck, whatever vehicle you're driving, is needing. And you make a small change, and you're trying to see if it fixed the problem that you felt like you were having, if it introduced another problem, things like that. And then if you're not driving the car to its fullest extent, or you're hurting the tires, you're not really giving yourself good data. So I put in a lot of work to get better at driving, so that I could be better at setup building. And that's just kind of a cycle where the better you are at one thing, it benefits the other. And so by the time 2022 rolled around, I was able to, after missing out on contender in 2021, which was a big disappointment for me at the time. I was able to win both rounds of Road to Pro in 2022, and then win a race in the Contender Series to qualify into the Coke Series.
So you talk about some of the races that you have won. What race stands out the most out of all your sim racing wins? Which one do you feel like is your favorite for whatever reason? Maybe it pushed you more in your career. Maybe it just, meant a lot to you. What win do you feel like means the most to you?
I have two. I would say number one on the list is the Phoenix race last year in the Coke Series. Um, some people would say it was lucky or a fluke win. I would disagree. I kind of, I felt like I said, I felt really good at Phoenix going into the race. I qualified fourth with what I thought was a kind of a bundled lap, so I knew we were going to be really fast. And I was trying to make a pass for the lead when the first caution came out. Unfortunately, there were a lot of cautions in the race that I feel like kind of made it seem more fluky than it was, and that really um, they mixed the strategy up so much that I was off strategy with Bobby Zelensky and Casey Kerwin. But I was racing with the guys, that I've watched for a long time in the Coke Series that are at the top of their game, that are such an elite level. And I felt like I was right there with them and better than them at a lot of time. At a lot of times, so I was able to pass Casey Kerwin, the reigning champion who won the championship at Phoenix on the same tires and drive away from him. And I was looking really good to win the race. Well, somebody crashed for, I don't know, 93rd, something like that. And that brought out the caution. And when you're the leader, when a late race caution comes out, you're not looking good because you can't see what everybody around you is doing when it comes to pitting. And so a lot of races this season, people had stayed out to try to get track position near the end of the race. And if you pit, you're just putting yourself so far back that you weren't going to be able to make up the ground. Well, I stayed out, and only two other cars stayed out with me. Everybody else pit for tires, so that put me at about a second a lap disadvantage to the guys on tires, and I had no buffer, and it was very stressful. About 20 or 30 minutes altogether because we had caution after caution. We went through all three of the green white checkers, and on the last green white checker attempt, we made it all the way to the entrance of turn three. Bobby gave me a shot going into turn three where I slid up the track. Casey Kerwin was already trying to roll to my outside, so we were three wide coming to take the white flag when the last caution came out, and I won the race because I was ahead. So that was definitely a big moment for me because it allowed me to lock in to the final four at Homestead in 2 weeks of the NASCAR Hall of Fame and get to compete there. So that was, super awesome on a personal level that I was able to lock in. But I felt like I really earned that win, even though there was some luck at the end. When I was driving away from the field before all the luck, I felt like that was a really big moment for me. That was like, yes, I can do this. I've arrived and I'm doing a really good job here.
Absolutely. So I'll bring it back to Robert Hill. I'm sure he has some good questions as well.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. A win's a win, Tucker. You take him as you can get him, no matter what happens. It might be fluky, but it's still a W in that chart. So that's all that matters. But walk us through some of the behind the scenes. What kind of prep work goes in between the races? How many nights a week are you practicing? Are you having meetings with your teammates to decide maybe what you want to do, what strategies you might want to go with for the race? Walk us through that process a little bit.
Yeah, so we typically have 2 weeks between races, especially when they're open setup races. And so one race ends, very rarely will go back and test at a previous track just to see if we felt like we were off, if we can improve. Normally that would be maybe one day after, but that's not something we really do a ton of. We'll get the weather generated to where we think what the conditions will be for the race, and then we post that so everybody on my team has the same conditions, so we know we're testing the exact same things. Then it comes to developing a base. Luckily, a lot of the tracks have carried over year to year in the Coke series, so we have kind of a good starting point for a lot of tracks right now. But then it's all about just trying to chip away time. So we use a spreadsheet where everybody puts in their times, and you kind of track, who's fast, and if it's a setup that's faster, if it's somebody else that's just driving faster than you on the same setup. And then there's lots of tools that we use. We use Motec to help us build the setup. A lot of tools in there where you're looking at ride heights or shocks or things like that. and then also the VRS coaching software. I like to use that to kind of compare myself to my teammates if I feel like I'm struggling somewhere. I would say I test probably for 1 or 2 hours a night on average. So I don't really try to regiment it because I think that's a way where you end up getting burnt out. What I like to do is, some days I feel like doing 1 or 2 runs, and then some days I feel like doing 4 or 5 runs on a certain track. And so um, I'm not trying to, unless I absolutely have to, push myself to do 5 runs on a day where I only want to do 1 run because I'm only going to end up getting burnt out. So it's kind of a balance. Luckily, like I said, I have a lot of good teammates that, if one person is kind of feeling a little bit burnt out or has other commitments, there we have a lot of guys that are able to take the slack. And that's kind of what makes us work so well, I think.
You're definitely right on that. You don't want to make it a routine too much where it starts feeling more like a job, which in a way it is. Of course, you're out here competing on professional levels, but you don't want to overwork yourself to the point where it just feels like a chore getting on and doing it. So I totally understand that. And you mentioned your team. What does your team look like on a typical race night? Do you have someone in there acting as a crew chief? Do you have a spotter that works with you? I know most of the guys do, but who do you have in your corner on a race night?
Yeah, I mean, going back to what you just said real quick, a lot of people, there's some people that want to say that we should do fixed racing, we should limit our practice. But like you said, it is, we're professional sim racers. We're getting paid to play video games, which it's a cool gig, and I'm very proud to be there. And
For sure.
everybody here deserves that, um, you know, to be compensated. But I think some people don't want to put the work in that goes along with being a professional sim racer and practicing and things like that. And I just want to say I'm a big fan of open racing for that reason. Um, but on my team, I have 1 to 2 people on any given race night. Um, I have a spotter, Robert Miller. He spots probably about half to 3/4 of the races. Sometimes he has work commitments that keep him from being able to jump on the spotter stand, but I guess you could say he's my primary spotter. And then Chris Hill, who was with us at Daytona, he was in the Drive Smart to Daytona series, ended up finishing second in the championship. He's my crew chief, and then slash spotter, you could say, when Robert isn't able to make it. Um, and so I kind of have Chris making sure that everything's looking good from a fuel perspective, trying to come up with what the perfect strategy is, for the situation we're in, and looking out for things that could catch us off. If there's some guys battling hard that could bring a caution out during a pit cycle, things of that nature. But Chris also does a good job spotting when he's on the spotter stand. So it's good to have at least one person. I think you really need to have to make sure you don't just pile into a wreck. But I like having 2 people when I'm able to.
It's definitely nice to have more eyes. The more that you can see ahead and behind you, the better. It kind of keeps you safe on the racetrack and keeps you focused on driving rather than trying to calculate everything in your head at the time. But obviously, Coke Series is your main focus, but do you get involved in any other league racing? Where else can we find you out there on the racetrack aside from just official racing, of course?
Yeah, so the Coke Series is my main thing, and I try to hit the big special events that are going on the iRacing Oval side, whether that's the Firecracker 400 that eRacer has been putting on. Sometimes I'll run um, the Blake McCandless special events I've been looking at as well. He's a friend of mine. I think he puts on some pretty cool events. And so I try to hit those. I don't run as much league racing as I used to. I ran FTF back in the day. Uh, every once in a while I toy with the idea, but then I kind of think against it just because of some of the stuff. I don't know if I really want to pay the entry fee and then get mad at race control. Is kind of what it comes down to. So I haven't really dipped my toes back into the FTF series recently, but mainly the iRacing. Um, I'm doing a little bit of special events right now. Looking forward to the Sebring 12 hours this weekend in the rain. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Um, and then I try to do some fun official races. I'm thinking about starting to stream some of those. Me and like I mentioned earlier, my teammate Ryan will just show up with very little practice. And we're not dangerous on the racetrack, I like to think. But it's just something fun to kind of break up the monotony of testing and competing at such a high level on ovals. We'll go run a dirt oval race, or we'll go run a road race, or something like that. Um, And then lastly, I'm trying to get the I've Been Everywhere award on iRacing. iRacing has these, little awards that you can get, like say you won at 8 tracks or 16 tracks. They have like little things for that. Well, they have one called I've Been Everywhere, which is a win at every track that iRacing has released.
Oof.
Now I have 3 tracks left. I've been working at this
Three.
for, yeah. And so every build it gets a little bit more difficult because they release, they've been really on the warpath of releasing a bunch of tracks for the last three
It's
or
because
four
of you.
builds. Yeah, it's like they know what I'm trying to do. So luckily I'm back down to 3. I was down to 3 at the end of the last iRacing season. They released 3 tracks, and then I won at 2 of the new tracks, and one of the tracks I was waiting to win at. So now I have to win. I have 3 races left, or 3 tracks. Hopefully, I do it in 3 races. Winton, which iRacing just made free, so I'm hoping it'll be on a few more schedules this season. I'll be able to run some races there. Um, Millbridge, they just came out with. It'll be interesting to try to win at. I like dirt, but it's a very small track, so that'll be fun. And the last one is Mount Fuji. So of those 3 tracks, I'm gonna try to win at those this season, along with the Coke Series. And I'm thinking about streaming it just because I don't think a lot of people have that award on iRacing. And maybe it'd be interesting for people to tune in and try to see me get that.
And you mentioned you like dirt. You've done a lot of road stuff. You've won on pretty much everything. Have you thought about being one of those drivers that attempts multiple high level series, such as the Coke Series and I forget the name of the top level road series or the World of Outlaws? Have you thought about trying more than just one at a time?
Yeah, I've looked at a few. My back end team, Altus Esports, um, they really have a presence in almost every iRacing World Championship. They were the inaugural winners of the World of Outlaws Championship with Tim Ryan, and then they won PESC last year with Jordan Caruso, the Road Series, the Porsche Esports Super Cup, and they also had a bunch of guys in the Delara IRO One Championship. I looked at competing in that potentially because it had some ovals, but with how the Coke season was going last year, I wanted to really just make sure that was my primary focus. I didn't want to put any extra time really into learning another car and things like that. I feel like I could have qualified for it. I don't know if I would have been in championship contention, but I think I could have qualified for that. I think I would need to do a lot more practice on dirt. I like it; it's fun, but I wouldn't say I know the metas of dirt, where it's like, okay, at this moment I need to go immediately to the top or things like that. Right now, I'm happy with where I am with the Coke series, but I never say never.
So it's a not right now, but maybe one day. We'll keep our eyes out for that one, and hopefully you can get that award, win all those races. Hopefully this season, and before iRacing releases more tracks for you to have to chase down.
Yeah.
DLB, how close are you to that award? Do you have wins pretty much everywhere?
Oh man, I mean, almost all the oval tracks, far from the road tracks, far from the dirt tracks, but oval, I'm probably pretty close. There's probably a couple oval tracks I haven't won at, but I feel like most of them I have. I think Dover is probably about the only one I probably haven't won yet at this point. But man, I mean, after all my years on sim racing, you get lucky here and there. Most of my wins have came from pit strategy, just staying out when nobody else did. Um, I mean, you gotta gamble on iRacing, man. That's the thing. You gotta gamble to get some of these wins. That's where a lot of my wins have came from. It's just straight gambling and making very ballsy pit calls. But iRacing is so much fun. So my final question for Tucker here is obviously playing at such a high level, such a competitive level. How do you continue to step it up with the competition being as tough at it as it is? Because you're racing with the best, and the best is only continuing to get better without hitting a ceiling. How do you continue to step it up and compete with the best of the best right now on the NASCAR market as far as eNASCAR goes?
Yeah, so luckily, I have great teammates to compare against. I have Bobby Zielinski and Keegan Leahy that I'm able to compare with against throughout the week. And so, they're 2 super established guys. Bobby's been second in the championship so many times. Keegan, you know, a champion from 2021. And then I have Jordy coming into the series with me at the same time, as well as my teammate Michael Cozy Jr. Ryan Doucette, and now Seth Merchant, we were really able to push each other. And so, from a driving standpoint, there's always that want to be the fastest every week. And so I think that kind of helps me stay sharp throughout the week of making sure that I'm as fast as I can be in that regard. And then from a racing standpoint, it goes back to just looking back at past races, trying to figure out what the right strategy is. Typically, is there normally caution, so I shouldn't pit under green, or is there normally a late race caution that I need to position myself for? Things like that kind of gets you ahead. And then it is hard going up against people like Steven Wilson, Casey Kerwin. They're really pushing us all to the, as high as we can be. And so you don't really get to compare against them except for when you're racing in the Coke series. So you kind of just have to go back and look at, were we better than them, but I drove worse? Or did they have a faster car than I did? Things like that. And it's always, that's the fun part about racing. It's, the constant search for the weakest link. And so you just keep working hard and kind of keep putting a high level of effort into it. And I think that's kind of what is able to keep you on top.
Absolutely. So we're gonna go with Robert one final time. Any final questions from you, Robert?
Yeah, one final question. I meant to hit on it earlier. Obviously, you're still in your early years of the Coke series, but have you developed any rivalries on the racetrack yet? If so, who's the rival? Who's the guy that we got to beat every week?
I don't know. I mean, last year I didn't feel like there were too many people that I had a real bone to pick with. I mean, I always wanted to beat Jordy just because we were teammates at Team Dillon. We're also teammates on Altus, so we really push each other back and forth all the time. But recently, there's just been some people that have really been burning me up. I just feel like they keep making stupid moves. Man, I hate to call anybody out like this, but Garrett Lowe wrecking me at Las Vegas. I'm like, what is he doing? Like that was pretty stupid, and I felt like he was being a little careless at Atlanta. Um, so I would say Garrett. I don't really feel like I'm going to cut him many breaks. And then Cody Bias. I don't really have a rivalry against him, and I kind of feel bad bringing it up, but he ran to the back of me twice checking up for wrecks at Atlanta. Um, so I was like, for a while, like it took me an hour after the race to kind of simmer down and not be mad at him, even though it was kind of racing deal. But I would say Jordy's kind of my main rival. Um, and then just kind of comes and goes. Like right now, Garrett Lowe. No, I'm not the biggest Garrett Lowe fan, even though we both went to UNC Charlotte.
Watch out, Jordy, and don't get on Tucker's list. He's coming for you.
Absolutely. So Tucker, thank you so much for coming on here tonight. Where can the folks find you at? Whether if that's your Twitch or your X or your Instagram, where can they find you at?
Yeah, so for all the social media sites I'm on, I'm just Tucker Minter with no space, TuckerMinter. That's what my Twitch is, and my Twitter. That's kind of the main two things I use for all my sim racing content. So that's where you can find me.
Thank you so much for coming on here tonight. That is a wrap for episode number 6 of the Pit Crew podcast. Whew, it's been a fun journey so far, and we'll catch you all in the next stream next week, next Thursday night. You know where to find the action. Be sure that you like and subscribe, and we're going to tune it out tonight.